Duncan Ojwang. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your time. Prof, on here, before I come to Dr. Ojwang, ideally the point of this generational shift in which you have pointed it out as the clash of generations.
Yes.
How will it end, perhaps, the very glaring problem at our electioneering time of ethnicity?
Well, the first time I put that concept on the table, the crash of generations, I think was 2005 and 2002, and I was studying Mungiki. It was the same situation as we are in now. Possibly now this is more public because of the changing media environment, the social media and all. But that time, it was the young people would be arrested in town. Young people, maybe what you would call the lumpen proletariat, very ordinary people. They disappear. So I was that time working with Wiro Mutunga at Kenya Human Rights Commission, and we, as young people that time, we took turns going to police station to check who has been arrested. And I think that's how I became a Mungiki scholar, essentially, because we were asking where they are. The good difference between the state that time and now is that at that time, immediately somebody disappears, you would appear in court, 4:45. As courts are, and finally, if they think you are dangerous, then you'll be issued with detention papers and so on. And
that's despite then the period was an older constitutional dispensation.
There was an older constitutional dispensation that had so many ways of, the state violating the law, the same law on which it was based, and that was the basis of the clamor for a new constitution. There was no other basis except what was in the older constitution. So that generation fought its fights. I can take you back a little bit without talking too much and tell you that the story of Kenya is itself interwoven with the crashes of generations, and that's what has shaped us. The community from which I come, which is Mount Kenya, basically traces itself from a crash of generations where the old people were so dictatorial, the young people rose up, and what happened? There was a crash of generations and the new community was born. If you look at the Karenjin, you look at the Kikuyus, you look at the Kambas and all, they are all based on a political system called moiety, that the old respect the young and the young are loyal to the old. Somehow you have to negotiate your way in between. It's a political system called moiety, which is two systems based on two generations. And it's mutual respect, mutual recognition of each other, and listening to each other. The problem we have today, which is taking us back to that kind of a discourse, is that the older generation, which is about 5% of our population, is not listening to the majority of our population, which is about, if you look at 35 years, and people at 35 years, they are almost 80%, almost. So what we are saying, in short, is that the system today has to deal with the grievances of younger generation, not through violence, but through discourse. There is no alternative to it. Now, it doesn't matter whether you have a new draconian bill or you want to return the detention laws or whatever you want to do. Face it, history will always repeat itself. No older generation has ever defeated the younger generation in history. Check all your books. No older generation has ever defeated the younger generation. Why? Because if you defeat the younger generation, you have defeated yourself. These are your children. What are you telling us? You are fighting, you are giving birth to children so that you kill them, so that you finish them. And what future are you giving us? Okay. So this is the philosophical question when we come to the crash of generations, that the crash of generation has to be ended through negotiations, through peaceful means, and through legal means, not criminal means. And the moment the state resort to criminality, then we have the problem that your friend Frantz Fanon was talking about. You now start to define the moral basis of violence, which is a very slippery path, where there is what we call criminal violence, which is usually perpetrated by dictatorial states. And we have emancipatory violence, the violence that seeks to restore order, justice, and common decency. And at that level, you are now on the space called devolution. And devolutions are ugly.
Yeah, and then that is now the emancipatory virus comes from now the ruled, isn't it?
It comes, yes, because the state is the only instrument in the systems of governance which is allowed to wield violence legally. But the moment it now uses that violence in a criminal sense, remember the tear gas is financed by Wanjiku. Remember the police officer is paid by Wanjiku. The military is paid by Wanjiku. Because legally the state is supposed to wield power in order to maintain law and order. But it is about the state, not about the individual. The moment the state now stride out of the common decency, now, again, without taking too much time, Kenyatta could not demonstrate in Nairobi in 1920s and 30s. So he went to demonstrate in Hyde Park in London. All the people paid for him to go by ship so that he can be waking up every morning to tell the Queen at Hyde Park in London that there are people in Kenya who are oppressed by the white people, okay. You are subject. You see, this is where, and the moment Kenyatta failed, what did you get? Mau Mau.
Okay. Prof. Short, I'll come to you. Yes, Dr. I'll come to you, Dr. Dambas. Yes.
Right. You know, however much we talk of liberty, there is no liberty without law.
Yep.
And law does not limit liberty. Law is what establishes and entrenches liberty. And sometimes we might look at government. Even before you get to government, order in every society, the social contract was to bring order. Whether we elect our president or we have no president or we have chief, whether it's in a village where somebody paint their camel or donkey black, somebody agreed to paint it red. And so the issue of law and order has become almost same side of the same coin. So that as we talk of picketing, we must differentiate it from riot. And that is basic. And we have 15 years of the 2010 Constitution to look at and to say what is the reality on the ground. Do we have a right to picketing? Yes. To what extent is this sometimes subsumed by riots? And we cannot live on this side of history after 15 years in the utopian world where we are talking of ideal situation, yet we know that there is some time a place where somebody has blocked the highway, for example. That cannot be picketing. People cannot move. Pregnant women cannot get to the hospital. Somebody has blocked government offices for the whole day. So those who want those services cannot get there. There must be an order to say that those who have grievances or who are picketing can occupy at this time or on this side, and the rest can also access the services. The destruction of property. Not everyone who goes there. And I was saying I was differentiating the 3-4 layers of people who get there. So we cannot still talk of utopian condition that the Constitution gave, yet in reality we have seen some difficulties. We have seen people delayed to get to the airport because the roads are blocked. And therefore, it behooves us to come with legislation. And this is the danger, because a lay person will read the Constitution like Shakespeare book. There is some underlying principle. And that is why people go to law school for 4-6 years, so that you cannot just read and say, it's written here. There is some underlying principle, because at the heart of law is that there must be balance, proportionality, even the law of war. When people go to war, there is distinguish between civilian and non-civilian, civilian property and non-civilian property, do not hurt the wounded, do not whatever. There is no sport that can be not guided by law. And that is why sometimes this clarification and zoning is not to limit the liberty, but to expand it, but in a way that is orderly.
Okay. Dr. Dambas, ideally then, let's get this soundbite from the former Interior CS before you respond. And this is what he told my colleague Sam yesterday night on the Explainer program.
We didn't take time to find out what happened. Yet, if we had had an inquest, it would have given an opportunity to the Gen Z and the young people to express themselves, to put forward the issues of concern, and to have provided an opportunity for their parents and other people, civic organizations, faith-based organizations, and other players in society to express themselves. You know, when a conversation is going on in the country, chances are that you are likely to move the same direction, carry the country with you, or carry the people with you as you move forward. But when things happen the way they're happening now, those whose responsibility it is to convene and take decisions behave like nothing has happened. Everything is, business as usual. Right. While on the other hand, the same issues that are being raised every day are not being addressed. So I'm saying, can we have a point of engagement, where, and the civic leaders have called this, the Conference of Catholic Bishops has called this. Everyone is saying, look, why can't we have a framework of engagement where expression can be done by our Gen Z?
Danvers, we cannot ignore the voices of young Kenyans and what they are raising.
Yep. If you look at 2007-2008, the Agenda 4, addressing long-term issues, because the political crisis was a trigger, There were structural issues, the real drivers of conflict that pushed the country to the brink of civil war. High inequality, poverty, high youth unemployment, institutional reforms, which some of them have, legal reforms, and issue of land. How many of those issues have been addressed today, 3 regimes later? Actually, even worse. We have a higher youth unemployment. We have higher inequality. Look at Gini index then, now. I think it's even getting worse. We've not addressed those drivers, true drivers, that they're actually ticketing today. And my concern is, it's easy to talk about the here and now. And that's what we are, even in this conversation today, we are talking about the protest, but that's not really the issue. It's you go to the doctor, and the doctor tells you, oh, you have a headache, and they focus on the headache, not why you're having a headache in the first place. So the prescription has to be based on the correct diagnosis of the problem. And the reality is, number one, there is absolutely no quick fix to the crisis we are facing right now. And the youth are, you know what the youth want, and we cannot put them, they're not homogeneous. The young people are not homogeneous in this country. And I want to put labels upon them. And it's unfortunate when we put labels and describe them, and we don't really understand them. If you take time to study them and understand what they want, apart from what they generally want is an opportunity to live a decent life. Unfortunately, in the history of our country, and just give me 1 minute just to put it this way.
Yes.
In 1980, late 80s, early 90s, we had the onset of a population bulge. The birth rate was extremely high, 4.9, I think, by the 89 census. Other countries in Asia, when they saw that, they started investing in social programs. We, under the IMF and the World Bank, remember structural reforms in the 90s, cut all these programs. We said, well, the IMF, and even last year, the crisis was precipitated by the IMF prescription saying you have to do this. Now, we, Prof, and this panel here, they studied during the days of boom. And university then and now is 2 different worlds altogether. The quality of education is extremely low. Now, guess what? Instead of investing in when we saw the population surge, we cut all these social programs. We never invested in anything particular, whether it's agriculture, whether it's education. And guess what? In the 90s now, when these Gen Zs were being born and they became of age now, instead of investing in their future like Malaysia and Singapore, we absolutely cut everything out. Now, do you know KNBS data, 2019? Do you know the population of people who have gone to university? People will be shocked. It's less than 10%. 90% of Kenyans have only secondary education. And what they do have is this phone. So we have people who are not exposed, not grounded, with a phone, with a trail to the world, with high expectations, with serious economic crises, and of course we'll have a problem. So that's what I'm saying. We need to address those specific structural issues and the real complex issues that we face as a country, and have that dialogue and conversation. Then we can address, because these are economic issues. It's a fiscal issue. Okay. It's a monetary policy issue. We need to address those issues so we can actually fix our country. Okay. This is not just for politics. We need to address structural issues of our country.
I'll come to Shelley. Yes, Prof, you had a point.
Yeah, I'll agree with my colleague here that the country is full of counterfeit academics, and this is a thing that has happened since the 80s, when actual academics were exiled, jailed, detained, and so on, and we produced a whole slew of counterfeit academics who continue to inform public discourse, and this is sad. And we just have to contend with what we have. The second thing I have to say is that, and this is in response to what Dr. Ojwang said, the Constitution is not written by lawyers and is not written for lawyers. The Constitution is written by we, the people, and it is written for we, the people. And therefore, lawyers go to school to understand what we, the people, write and what we, the people, want. And therefore, we, the people, can speak to the Constitution, can speak to the rights that we give to ourselves. And that should never be forgotten. The third thing that I would like to say is that Kenya is founded on a very shaky foundation of lies, absolute and complete lies. We have a lie that Jomo Kenyatta was a revolutionary and was a leader of Mau Mau. He was not. Jomo Kenyatta denounced the Mau Mau. Jomo Kenyatta said the Mau Mau are violent and we are following a political solution. I studied. My Master of Medicine thesis was based on the Mau Mau revolution. I looked at the Mau Mau concentration camp survivors 50 years after they were incarcerated. I looked for post-traumatic stress disorder among them, and 2/3 of them had symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder 50 years after the incarceration. This country is founded on lies. We will not solve the problems of this country by focusing on what's happening today and what's happening in the streets and so on. We will solve the problems of this country by going back and looking at the foundational story of Kenya. And the foundational story of Kenya is lies. And this is why you have people in leadership who thrive on lies. If you go back and re-educate ourselves, we will find that nothing new is happening today. Protests have always been there. The methods of dealing with those protests are founded on the colonial philosophy of these guys are children that we have to control, and we have to teach them how to do things. That is how we are still doing it today. We have to change that because the people protesting are no longer children. And the narrative that we weave when we keep saying that these kids, is a dangerous narrative because it doesn't give people the opportunity to express themselves in a way that we can address their problems. Finally, I would say we worry about the people picketing in front of Parliament. We worry about that. The people elected that Parliament. The people have a right to stand before that Parliament and tell them, you guys are not representing us anymore. They have a right to do that. What Parliament needs to do is to reimagine their existence in an environment that protests against them. Instead of creating new systems to stop people from protesting against them, they have to reimagine their existence in an environment that protests against them. The executive must reimagine its existence in an environment where people constantly protest against them. The judiciary must reimagine its existence in an environment where people protest against them. So I think this is the problem that we are facing today, that the state, largely REIT, is using colonial mechanisms to try and deal with modern problems, and it will not work.
And Sheila, coming to you, Prof, you'll respond to that. Sheila, coming to you, Professor Lukoye points at black colonization in the aftermath of the end of colonization. And as of course, my what's your expectation? What's your expectation then of a political class today that is largely a byproduct of Kanuism? I mean, if you look at the president, stalwart YK92 member, an MP in 1997, stood with Uhuru Kenyatta at the height when everyone deserted him, then became a cabinet minister in the Grand Coalition government, opposed the new constitution, became the first deputy president, and now president. And the Kanu oligarchy, the byproducts a constitutional order? Do you have any hopes that they understand what you guys are raising and the needed democratic credentials that should govern the Kenyan polity today?
My own father actually was a minister in the KANU regime. He was a member of KANU, and so when I look at them now, I can understand because I lived with somebody who was in the KANU regime. However, I think the difference was that in life, my dad was willing to adapt and change as things were moving by, and that's what I would always encourage this regime. You cannot apply the same tactics that worked then now, and you're applying it to us who never understood what the KANU regime was. Like I said, I went through school at the Kibaki era, and so that's what I understand, if you ask me. And I remember very vividly a lot of stories that were being told at the time about economic prosperity, about how it was easy to get access to credit. A lot of small businesses were began at the time. And what is going on is that unless we have proper leadership that is willing to come to the table and say, hey, I'm coming from a different place than you are, hey, this is the way I see things, and this is the way you see things. Now, how do we come together and we coexist? Because we must coexist. And again, this is not a small population. This is not a few goons here and there and a few youths here and there. This is 70% or even more of this country. So if you cannot listen to 70% or even more of this country, then where are we heading? And the tactics that are being used clearly are not effective. 1 year later, last year, during the same time, that's when we were in the streets getting tear gassed and injuring ourselves. Now again this year, literally on the same date, we're back on the streets again, meaning that there's a miscommunication that is going on. What is needed right now with the political class is that they need to understand that the general public is feeling alienated from them. And because they're put in positions of leadership, they're the ones to call the house to order and say, this is the way I see things. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. The other time we spoke about the list of promises that the president made last year. And I personally was very happy when he came out and he said, listen, we are going to work on austerity measures. Listen, there's no more harambes. Listen, and he gave a good, clear list. And I said, okay, that's what we've always wanted, because we have to separate what we are calling for as young people from the political opportunist. When I talk about things I'm talking about the issues. And I don't believe replacing, President Ruto with Prof here or Sheila here is going to be the magic pill. That is not it for me. I am talking about the issues. So when you come and you say, okay, guys, just calm down. This is the things that we're going to do. And then a few months later, what do we see? We see back to, monies being given in harambes. Mm-hmm. And we have a big population of this country that all they have is a phone. They do not have economic empowerment. Systemic economic empowerment is what we are advocating for, and things like that. So what needs to happen for us is very simple. We need to go back to the drawing board. There is no politics without economics. Okay. When I went to school and I wanted to do just economics, I was told you have to do political economy. Because there's no politics without the economics. The policies you have will affect the economics, and the economics you have will affect the policies. So when we studied modern day economics, we do political economy. Why? Because you have to ensure that the political class is well versed, is well prepared to handle and tackle the issue of economics. Young people, we want jobs, and no, we don't want you to go with a brown envelope and give us a job. My mother was telling me they used to walk around with a brown envelope and get jobs. That's not what we're doing. We have a very, very highly educated population, and we are risking getting this population becoming disillusioned. Okay. Give them jobs. Invest in IT. Invest in research and development. These will give us and by the way, these examples exist. You look at India, look at the Philippines. How are they able to absorb the youth so that the youth then there got some sense of employment? They have been able to create big IT hubs, business processing units. We can do that here. Why are we not focusing on those kinds of solutions?
Yeah, and Prof, the major 5 pillars of what the president said at the height of last year's Gen Z-led demonstrations were never met. Having advisors in government, he increased them to 20, nearly this cabinet. Compensation for families of victims who are felled by police bullet never happened. Expenditure is set out as an increment of over 600 million under this financial law, which started yesterday. Harambes, he ended up even dishing more, 20 million during one church service. Is this the typical birthmark of a state that still is bedeviled and is gripped by KANU policies? If you look at what they do, for example, regarding these empowerment programs where Kenyans are collected in a weekday and then the deputy president leads that charge of empowerment programs, not through policies, but through dishing handouts.
I think you are right in many respects regarding that. And I think what we are doing, both as government and the public, is burying our heads in the sand. We are burying our heads in the sand because what we are facing is not a product of William Ruto. The problem is that he has himself and or his people around him not understood it, which is why the issue of advisors become critical. We are talking about a youth purge. A youth purge meaning a youth boom where population, where the health is good, people are not dying, mothers are eating well, therefore they are productive and fertile, and there is something to go with in terms of food and so on. So you get a population boom. And that boom is supposed to be